Today, I'm going to be giving my thoughts and opinions on the book On Tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century by Mr. Timothy Snyder. Now, before I get into it, I do think it's important for you guys to know why I picked up the book. I actually was listening to the Karen Hunter show on YouTube, and her guest was Jane Elliott. Jane Elliott was being interviewed, and she was an educator who taught diversity, specifically focusing on racial discrimination. I like to think she acted as a white ally during the civil rights era, as she created that blue eyes, brown eyes exercise after MLK's Jr. assassination. Now, on the Karen Hunter show, Miss Elliott named a few books we should read, and she recommended the audience to purchase On Tyranny as soon as possible, as she believed it was important for every American to read this book due to the current state of this country. She emphasized that it was a very short read and we should implement all 20 lessons. Now, I don't know too much about Miss Jane Elliott, but the little that I do know about her, I respect it, and for that reason, I ordered the book. This was a very short and insightful read. I got to agree with Miss Jane on that. Each chapter/lesson, Mr. Snyder provided examples from different events and how people behaved during the rough times pertaining to Hitler's regime, which was Nazi Germany, and also the Stalin regime, which was Soviet Union, USSR. Mr. Snyder studied the rise of fascism in the 1930s. He believed that Hitler's historical actions were bracing because it tells us what we can learn, what we could do, and how there's alternatives when a person or group exert their immoral philosophies and beliefs on citizens. With that information, I believe this is what assisted him and prompted him to write this book. There are 20 lessons with each chapter designated to one lesson, providing a quote and historical examples. These lessons act as instructions on do's and don'ts of avoiding an authoritarian regime. Mr. Snyder believes history not only empowers, but it helps us get out of traps. However, that's only if we take the time to look at historical events. Although Trump's initial election prompted Mr. Snyder to write this book, Trump wasn't mentioned in the book. Mr. Snyder's goal is to get the readers to focus on the actions and behaviors of people affected in regime tyranny. So my favorite chapter was chapter 1, Do Not Obey in Advance. And the quote that went with this chapter is, most of the power of authoritarianism is freely given. In times like these, individuals think ahead about what a more repressive government will want, and then offer themselves without being asked. A citizen who adapts in this way is teaching power what it could do. Not the best quote in my opinion, because the citizen is going to be teaching power what it could do regardless. He or she is just going to have to choose the type of power they want to exude. The teachings of rebellious power or the teachings of compliance power. For that reason, I think the quote was a bit pointless. The reason why this is my favorite chapter is because I believe this is the most important lesson in the book. As I mentioned before, power will be exuded regardless. And being on the compliance side of things, when there's a strong shift with people's moral compass, is crazy work. Timothy's examples of Austrian anticipatory obedience, which is compliance, is how Austrian Jews' fate sealed. It's like they waved the white flag in the air when their government official, Chancellor, I hope I say this man's name right, Kurt von Schuschnigg, conceded when Germany threatened to annex his land. The thing is, anticipatory obedience means adapting instinctively without reflecting on new situations. So I think if people read this book, they will be more likely to exude power of rebellion instinctively. Now let's get into my juicy opinion, okay? So chapter 19, Be a Patriot. The quote that goes with this one is, set a good example of what America means for the next generations to come. They will need it. So as a Black American that takes the time to learn about Black history from Black scholars, I understand Black America's place in this society. I understand Black people's place as a collective in the world ran by Western people with Western ideologies and actions. So chapter 19 proves that there is a white America and there is a black America, which essentially means there's a divide as we see the country through two different lenses that don't complement each other. The entire book is about avoiding a cruel and unfair regime, and it provides examples from other dictatorial countries. However, not once did Timothy Snyder acknowledge that this country was, and in many ways still is, tyranny to a particular group of people. This country became the great country that it is due to tyranny. And because the more suitable group of Americans, the ones who are direct benefiters from their forefathers' actions or people that inherited those actions due to their race, because these people feel threatened by the projected racial demographic future of this country, it's pretty obvious that many of them are ready to burn the country to the ground if they can't enforce a strong power hierarchy like it once was. Hence, make America great again. Now, I do wish that Mr. Snyder took the time to acknowledge and provide a few events of American history on tyranny and how tyranny never vanished and only becomes noticeable after Black America feels a major win, whether that win is symbolic or legislative. The truth is, in America, Black wins equate to white losses. Obama's presidency was a huge win in Black America's eyes as he was the first Black president. Now, directly after, the most extreme bigot right winger was elected president, that president being Donald Trump in 2016. Talk about white backlash to Black progress. Fast forward to 2024, this man was re-elected after he won the presidential elections against the first half Black, or I'm gonna just say Black, the first Black woman to run for president because Joe Biden had dropped out of the presidential election. Trump is currently dismantling, or at least attempting to dismantle, the progress of human rights as he's destroying civil rights legislation. People think Make America Great Again is Donald Trump's slogan. However, this slogan has a genesis leading back to Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan's slogan was Let's Make America Great Again, and he was elected in 1976. Keep in mind, Black America's best economy was during the Civil Rights era, and that was from like the end of the very late 50s to 1975. So that's all the way up to 1 year before Reagan was elected. Now, that same president that said, let's make America great again, is the same president that pumped crack cocaine into Black communities, completely obliterating Black America's social and especially economic progress. Talk about extreme Black progress met with even more extreme white backlash. Talk about tyranny. In Chapter 7, Be Reflective If You Must Be Armed, page 48, paragraph 1, line 1 through 3, and it reads, Authoritarian regimes usually include a special riot police force whose task is to disperse citizens who seek to protest, and a secret state police force whose assignments include the murder of dissenters or others designated as enemies. And indeed, we find forces of that latter kindly deeply involved in the great atrocities of the 20th century, such as the Great Terror in the Soviet Union of 1937 through 1938, and the Holocaust of European Jews perpetrated by Nazi Germany in 1941 through 1945. Yet we make a great mistake if we imagine that the Soviet NKVD or the Nazis SS acted without support. Without the assistance of regular police forces and sometimes regular soldiers, they could have not killed on such a large scale. I thought it would be a wonderful and a great opportunity to use American examples because he's talking about authoritarian regimes and how it usually include police forces whose task is to disperse citizens who seek to protest. Well, in 1963, local police officers were using dogs to attack peaceful civil rights protesters. And local fighters were using high-pressure water hose against peaceful civil rights protesters. He further mentioned how, these authoritarian regimes had secret state police forces whose assignment included to murder of, dissenters and other designated enemies. Well, in the United States, the government has FBI files on every well-known black activist. The CIA and the NSA, which are government agencies, they established the quote-unquote the enemies list, aka Hutt's plan. And this was essentially authorized by President Nixon. And it was the practice of things like wiretapping, mail covers, break ins, and other foul play inflicted on black leaders. These are the same agencies that orchestrated plans to assassinate black leaders. The U.S. government has a historical pattern of sabotaging black America. And it's unfortunate that Mr. Timothy failed to name at least one example, especially considering the book is bringing awareness to what America is about to become. So, although this may feel new to many others, this isn't a surprise to America's permanent underclass group who have been experiencing ongoing tyranny since what? 1619, and it's reflected in our distrust in American institutions such as law enforcement, judicial branch, healthcare, education, etc. You could see in the way everyday black Americans carry themselves. It's all a result of unsolved tyranny, and it persists. Now, what Timothy Snyder wants is to keep America the democracy that it currently is before it slips away from us, failing to acknowledge that the same democracy is unfair to the descendants of American enslaved people as we still feel the effects. For that reason, I believe this book acts as a citizen guide to quote unquote save the current democracy. But honestly, I have mixed emotions about that. The thing is, if we save the current democracy, the future for Black America will remain stagnant with a few achievements that are met with even greater setbacks. Because remember, Black wins equate to white losses. But at least we would be somewhat comfortable and somewhat safe, right? The problem with this is we won't grow as a people. And our children's children will go through the same exact thing that we're dealing with right now, which is a hell loop as the private and public sector sabotage and or exploit our communities. And our sense of unity is completely non-existent thanks to the unhealed past that we have as a people. Now, if the current democracy collapse, the future of Black America will be set back by at least 100 years. And we will be uncomfortable and we will be unsafe. But this type of catastrophe would be enough to force us to lean on each other, build, and uplift. It seems that Black America does the best when our backs are against the wall with no wolves in sheep clothing there to play kind. The Black community is like a flower that will flourish when it's completely drowned. And history acts as proof. I have to make one more point. The back of the book reads, the founding fathers tried to protect us from the threat they knew, the tyranny that overcame ancient democracy. Today, our political order faces new threats, not unlike the totalitarianism of the 20th century. We are no wiser than the Europeans who saw democracy yield to fascism, Nazism, and communism. Our one advantage is that we might learn from their experience. Gotta clear my throat for this one because I'm about to say it loud with my chest. The founding fathers were dictators also, by labeling and treating humans as properties, dictating what they can and cannot do, using them for their own gain and not just economically. Not only did the founding fathers act as dictators, but they allowed white citizens to do so too. So if we want to speak about tyranny, America is the past and contemporary proof of tyranny and what tyranny can manifest into when disguised or morphed to fit modern societal standards. From my perspective, I see sheer irony because they are all immoral regarding the topic of humanity. Whether we go back to the Western ancient democracy or the totalitarianism of 20th century, America cannot heal without paying for its original sin. And failing to acknowledge America's past history of being a dictatorial regime that tried its best to cover its past without proper genuine resolutions, Timothy is sending an indirect message that America's democracy isn't as flawed as we think. And honestly, this is where a lot of European Americans lose me when speaking about unfair actions perpetrated on innocent people. Many of them prefer to speak about other countries' diabolical acts, but they fail to speak about the diabolical acts caused by their predecessors in their own backyard. This is one of the reasons why America won't be able to move forward. Now, aside from the lack of American examples on tyranny and, him in the back of the book saying, the founding fathers tried to protect us from the threats we knew, and, naming Nazism and fascism and communism. Look, it happened in our own backyard. You know what I'm saying? So, aside from the lack of American examples on tyranny, I believe that this is a pretty good short read. Every chapter, I was able to see the tales of the past manifested right before my eyes, thanks to the current president's administration and past administrations. The book is great if you want to know what actions you should take to select the side of history you want to be on. Disclaimer. I understand Mr. Timothy Snyder is a well educated Yale professor that studied the 20th century dictatorial regimes. His credentials, along with his age, is the reason why I stand 10 toes down on my thoughts and opinion of this book. Considering he studied Nazi Germany history, he has to know that the tactics and strategies utilized by the American government during the Civil Rights era were from Nazi Germany. It's literally the same tactics and strategies. Further, the reason why our country is heading into the direction that it is due to the improper solutions of handling America's diabolical past when it comes to the treatment of enslaved Africans and their descendants. Now, many people can say that they voted for the orange man for a better economy or to line their pockets, but at the end of the day, every American knew the heart of this man as his actions and speeches displays his character. The American regime is the epitome of deception as it hides behind misinformation, lies, willful ignorance, and most dangerously, in my opinion, blind eyes. Because Mr. Timothy Snyder couldn't address America's past, I'd like to look at that as a blind eye. See, sometimes the clearest messages are silent. What's the point of keeping the same democracy if no one is really truly providing true equitable opportunities for all Americans? What's the point of destroying this democracy if no one is truly willing to provide true equitable opportunity for all Americans? Oh, well, it sounds like regardless of what happens, the fight isn't for all Americans. Thank you guys very much for taking the time out to listen to my thoughts and opinion On Tyranny by Mr. Timothy Snyder. If you would like to hear more of my thoughts and opinions on other books, feel free to follow me, subscribe. I'm not really sure where I'm going to post this video, so whatever button you need to hit for this platform to receive this information, go ahead and hit that. Anyway, you guys have a nice day. Bye now.